Hi, and welcome back to Build Mode. I'm your host, Isabel Johannesson. And this season, we've been exploring go-to-market strategies for founders. But today, we're flipping the script and exploring how VCs understand their own go-to-market strategies, not just for potential portfolio companies, but also for their own funds. I had the chance to talk to Ross Fubini from XYZ Ventures, as well as Leslie Feinzaig from Graham & Walker Ventures, about the strategies that VCs use to differentiate themselves and build trust, not only with founders, but with their LPs as well. I really enjoyed this conversation. Not only do we get a sneak peek inside the black box of venture capital, but Ross and Leslie gave some really great advice for founders to have a framework to understand which VCs are really aligned with your vision as a founder and which are just maybe out after a hot deal. So let's dive into what VCs are really doing to win you over and how you can use that knowledge to build the right partnerships. Hi, Ross and Leslie. Thank you so much for joining us on this episode of Build Mode. I would love to kick things off by each of you introducing yourselves and telling us a bit about your firms.
Thank you so much for having me. It's lovely to be here. I'm Leslie Feinzaig. I am the founder and general partner at Graham & Walker Venture Fund. Spent most of my career in tech, but fun fact, I was born and raised in Costa Rica. I moved to America with a life-changing scholarship to go to Harvard Business School. I've been in the tech industry ever since. About a decade ago, I decided to quit my job and start a company, and that company didn't go anywhere. But the little meetup of women who were raising venture capital that I started when I was raising capital for my company became the largest community of venture-backed female founders in America. And I have been supporting founders and advocating for founders ever since.
Yeah, and Leslie, thanks again for having us. My name is Ross Fubini. I run a firm called XYZ. We're about $1.5 billion under management, doing investment in early stage companies, quite a lot in the public sector, companies selling to the government, a lot of enterprise software, a lot of fintech software. My own background is I trained as an engineer working at companies like Netscape that nobody's going to remember anymore because I'm 1,000.
I remember Netscape. We remember Netscape.
I started a company, sold it SuccessFactors into SAP, and been doing venture stuff for about the last 15 years before starting these funds in 2017.
Okay, so you both founded your firms around the same time, but I'm sure your paths were very different. Can you talk about what it was like to raise your very first fund?
I usually go first. I think I'm going to bet we had a very different experience.
Well, I'll tell you, my experience was it was a horror show. I mean, oh
Okay,
my
maybe
God,
not.
raising first funds is so genuinely difficult. And maybe I'll say two things about my experience that led to a lot of learning. The first thing was that, when you go and start a venture fundraise, the reality of venture is it's all just the work, like finding the people, paying the people, doing all that work. To raise the first fund, my own view is that you have to have a shtick, like something you believe that's like you fit uniquely in people's brains that's different. Back in 2017, I believed in this little known company called Palantir that was doing some interesting data stuff. And I had been an intimate to it because I had introduced the first employee to the second and was an advisor and an exec coach and investor in the company. The thing that I believed that was unique, that long story short, that ended up being true. We've backed 25 of those teams. Some of those were companies like Anduril and Cape and Apex and Chapter that are worth tens of billions to billions. And that was correct, but it was very hard in the earliest days. The second thing that I would say from those first funds, the reason, or one of the reasons it was hard is just because it is very hard to raise capital, to have a unique voice and for people to believe that unique thing, as I'm sure Leslie saw as well. The second thing was because I was absolutely terrible at something that I think every founder has to learn, founders and companies and in funds, is qualification. So I would bring the same energetic emotion, energy, effort to pitch, Yale as to pitch, hey, Isabel, do you have 50K? And it turns out just like every other sales process ever, you need to be really focused on qualification. So one of my learnings has been now when I talk to LPs, I literally know in 2 minutes if they're going to invest or not, because they either want the thing I'm offering or they don't. And I spend almost no time trying to convince them. And if I had a message for my earlier self and a message we tell the founders is just being ruthless on the qualification process, because it was so hard to raise that first fund?
I, listen, I don't come from a background in venture. I have never been wealthy enough to invest in it, right? Like I moved to America with like the proceeds I made from selling my car in Costa Rica. Like I'm not someone that came in with, with any connections or even know-how around the world of money. And it's been a real learning experience. And also I will say that I am a lot more of like a builder than I am a deal maker. I have a founder and operator mindset and personality. And so I'd never worked in venture before. And what really happened was I had been running the Female Founders Alliance for a few years and just had found this incredible work in helping people, like helping other people make their companies more successful. And I found that really fulfilling and inspiring. And I was like, okay, well, if I want to do this sustainably and for the rest of my life, then I should probably be investing in these companies too. And something happened around, I think it was like 2019. There was this guy that was a mentor. He was like an angel investor and the mentor in our programs. And he was raising a venture capital fund. And he was like, would you take a look at my deck? Kind of give me your feedback. You see a lot of decks. I'm like, I've never seen a VC fund deck, but sure. And I saw his deck, and every VC deck has a slide where it says like how I get my deal flow. And my logo was in his slide. And I was like, whoa, wait a second. Like my logo is good enough to be on somebody's like deal flow slide. There might be a there. And so I don't know. I was just like, you know what? The only way that I'm going to find out if I'm any good at this and if I love doing it is to try it. And I raised the first fund as a proof of concept that I could do the job, that I would enjoy the job. I went out to market to start raising in 2020 and the world went online. I ended up raising most of that fund sitting right here in this office with a baby on my lap on Zoom. It was hundreds of pitches. It was raised almost entirely from individuals. We ended up with 105 LPs. A couple of those are kind of corporates, and the rest are essentially just angel investors, right? Like people who, because if you don't have a track record, then what they're investing in is in you. Like it is basically like raising a gigantic angel round with no lead. That was the first fundraise. I've gotten a lot better raising ever since. But also venture has changed really dramatically in the 4 or 5 years since I started investing. And so I find that part of the game now is adapting to or like really understanding what your strategy is and what role you have to play in the ecosystem so that you can build a firm that can outlast the kind of big cycles that capital goes through.
To your point of things that have changed, something you just said there really stuck out is I struggled in our early funds understanding what was my unique point of view.
Yeah.
And it's because I didn't just want to be a banker that happened to show up early. And now when we talk to founders and when we talk to LPs, but really founders, the thing that I now feel much more very confident telling them is the thing that we are best at. Well, that we only really have one job. And so our job is to raise the next round of funding for the founders. And because my lived experience now, years in, is that the founders are always experts in their company, but having a unique voice at the table that both understands what's going on in the company, but then is intimate what's happening in the venture ecosystem. So you can understand, hey, if you don't have an AI story, oh my God, it's going to be hard just to stand out right now in this market. So find one that's authentic. Or everybody believes you can land for 30K. Let's put all of our energy in the next 4 months, 8 months, proving that 3 of these companies can expand to 300K. So you can have the ASP expansion or other more and less nuanced examples. They're not, hey, I'm going to text Mark Andreessen, he's going to think it's cool, but really you're actually plotting the path of the company with the founders from when you invest going forward. I found, I did not expect that, but that's a very unique role to offer them. And then I felt now I feel very comfortable that's our value prop. And I'm just curious, you said that shifted for you over time. And I'm curious if you went through a similar shift in, oh no, this is what is unique that we do in the world.
I'm just going to be really honest, because almost ironically, I found that one of our biggest value adds is the ability to have an authentic conversation with a founder. With the majority of their investors, or actually the majority of the world out there, they have to kind of put on a show. And I like to take a very similar approach to you, Ross, in that like having a VC on your cap table that is a founder, is an operator, is like well plugged in, but has a really high tolerance for the ugly, messy business of building a company and like what it actually looks like and feels like to have the sausage made. Like sometimes I look at other VCs that I admire and or not, right? Like these like really, really successful VCs. And to Ross's point, like they are financiers, like they are deal makers. And I am not. Like I am very much a builder. And that's kind of what I bring to the table. But for me, discovering that, feeling confident and comfortable with that, and also just growing as learning how to do the job and like getting a lot of reps in and like seeing a lot of deal flow, because I feel like in the very early days everything you see looks amazing, and because you just haven't seen enough. And so I mean I still feel like I'm a baby VC, right? Like I'm on my second fund, and I've had the, let's call it, luck and hard work, etc., but the luck of having spent my time in VC through like really dramatic shocks in the ecosystem and having that be my learning experience. I almost feel like this is what the VCs that went through like 2001 crash and the '08 crash would have learned. I feel like that has been my school of venture capital, is like seeing market behavior at the tippy top of the market and seeing what happens like a month later when the vibe changed. The good news for my LPs and for myself is that I have like the stubbornness of a middle child who doesn't like to be told what to do. And so I've like never been one to play into FOMO. But I feel like, if you kind of start investing and learn how to invest at the tippy top of the market, you're just going to like throw your entire fund into like buzzy Web3 crap, right? Like, and I've like had the privilege to see all of that. And that has been my formation as a VC. And then on the flip side, it's just like you look at, so much of the model is like, especially when you're investing early, is like helping those companies cross the chasm into raising their next round, or just like getting the credentials so that they're believed in the next round. And I feel like I've gone through that journey myself as a VC. So I still feel like I'm super, super close to the founder experience. And maybe that'll change when the fund gets a lot bigger and further down the line.
Yeah, but also hopefully not, right? If that's your superpower.
Yeah, I mean, I think like it does take discipline to stay like to like play the game that you're really, really good at, right? Like versus, going all over the map because you are able to accumulate a lot more money and do a lot more.
Yeah, and I think a lot of this advice is also what we tell founders, right? Is to sticking to what they're good at and, hiring where they need to so they can focus on their core competence. But even kind of circling back to what you were saying earlier about, how you need to qualify your leads, you need to find the right types of investors, whether it's individuals or corporates or government. But I wanted to talk more about this investor deck of which you speak from a VC perspective, because I think that's something that very few people have actually laid eyes on, is a VC fund deck. And I'm curious, in this sort of following this train of thought of comparing and contrasting being the founder of a fund and the founder of a company or a startup, what is different about an investor deck than a startup deck, and what are sort of the key elements in that deck?
I think it's more the same than different in maybe two ways. The first is just like with a portfolio deck, you just have to have a hook like right at the beginning. You're telling people like why they care, why they should bother to be excited about it. And so in first funds, that's, let me tell you the thing I believe about Palantir. Let me tell you the angles around the network. Without that, like people just never get to your second, third page the same way they don't in your portfolio company deck. The second thing I would say is somewhat counterintuitive, which is now I think you need to be able to tell the story without the deck. And by that, when you see this done at a world-class level, both for fundraising of companies as well as for funds, you can just begin at any point in the pitch based on what it is. Isabel, we're just, I'm so excited that you love our focus on defense. Let me tell you that our fund began with three premises. One was sector focus. Second was, portfolio concentration. Third, blah, blah, blah. And then I can begin the exact other place. Like, oh, you're really excited about our late stage. We have three pillars. One is really about dollar concentration. So we've done this whole dollar concentration story. Second is sector concentration. Like you can kind of flip around. So the point of that is that you actually don't need the deck. In fact, usually these days, especially on Zoom, you're very rarely using decks, both for funds and companies, but you have so much familiarity with the story and so much, frankly, practice that you can tell it a lot of different ways in great comfort. So I think those two things are the same. The thing that's maybe different is you have to have clarity around a different set of mechanics. So for companies where it's the go-to-market, price point, ICP, here I really think it's what's the portfolio construction? What are the things that you can show, especially over multiple funds? You've got progressions. You had a theory that you're able to concentrate more dollars and own more over time. Have you done that or not? If you're a generalist fund like us, if you've picked a series of sectors and show that story. So that's those are things that are more unique to the business of running funds. By the way, I want to tell you one thing that is a funny uncomfortability, which I'm sure Leslie's had as well. Like once you're practiced, there's a part of me that feels, I guess, like a salesperson or really embraces being a salesperson or even a politician. Like I know where my jokes are in the openers. I know the stories I tell 4 times. And the founders are the same way. Like, here's the great narrative of where I met that customer. Like, and they're true.
So that's really funny because when like I said, I raised the first fund through COVID when we were all working from home. And so I was like in this office and my husband was right behind doing his work. And so the poor guy sat through like 150 times of me telling the same story and jokes. I was like, oh my God, I hope you still love me after this because I sound so obnoxious. Like, can you imagine hearing the same damn like intro? That it is completely true. Like it sounds really natural because I've practiced it like 1,000 times. For a founder in your deck, there are checklist type of slides that you need. Our checklist is a little bit different. The similarity is you are trying to tell a story of differentiation in as few words as possible. And that is extremely difficult to do. On the one hand, building a deck is an exercise in learning how to tell your story in a really unique and compelling way. And the funny thing is, to Ross's point, when you achieve that point, I really don't use my deck almost at all. Like in fact, the other day I had to send a deck. I was like, geez, I haven't updated the thing in like 9 months. Like it doesn't have any updates at all, because if I'm really good at what I do at like my fundraising, the only thing the deck does is get a meeting, if that. And so I actually think that like my most powerful fundraising material is just my blurb. It's like a one tiny paragraph about who I am and why you should meet with me. And that damn little paragraph gets updated on like a weekly basis. Like I feel like as a founder or a VC, like your job is to write a blurb about yourself and update it and update it and update it, and then you die. The hardest part about the deck or the story or even just like raising the VC fund is telling a story of differentiation, because capital is a commodity. Like money is a commodity. If you're really good, you can get money anywhere. And there are literally thousands of VC funds. It's not like our product is any substantially different, right? Like we all give money, we all give advice, we all give instructions. Our networks, if we're really good, our networks are highly overlapping. So we all have access to like the same famous people. And so being able to differentiate yourself and your firm in the context of just like the thing is a commodity is extremely, extremely hard. And for many of us, the differentiation is in the relationships and like the know-how that we bring and how we show up to the table. And that is really hard to capture in a deck.
It's very interesting you say that, because I think the vast majority of founders, at least I've encountered, would probably jump back a little bit when they hear that, there's so many VCs out there and money is everywhere, because it probably doesn't feel that way for some of these founders, right? And I'm really enjoying this comparison between the VC founder journey and a tech startup founder journey, because I think there are Many times we hear that, VCs are founder friendly, but what does that really mean? And oftentimes it's, obviously pressuring towards getting returns for your LPs, and that what founders might say is not so founder friendly. But to really realize and internalize that VCs have been through a very similar process that the founders that you work with are going through and can at least empathize and advise on that process, I think is something that a lot of founders want to hear more about. And particularly this part about, now we have the deck, we have the pitch. How do you then go about building your target list of LPs as they would a list of investors? What does the landscape of LPs look like?
Can I actually jump in before I answer that question, just on something that you said there, which is that VCs can be founder friendly because we've gone through this same experience. But this is actually this conversation is not a representation of venture capital. You are talking to two people who have built and raised their own VC firms. And that is actually really rare. So most VCs are career VCs, like they have jobs at other firms and they have never raised capital before. So this is actually quite a unique experience. I do think that it makes a VC like Ross or like myself have a lot more appreciation of what the founder journey is. But most VCs don't have to go through this, right? Like particularly in multi-partner firms, you have an investor relations person and they go out and they do the fundraising.
The other thing, by the way, that I want to build on that. This is neither good nor bad, but it's just different. Is I was talking to somebody else, like, is at another big multi-stage firm, and he's like, "Oh, well, I know how the game is played," and I'm like, "Oh, sir, there is no game. There is just like finding the best goddamn people, trying to get money in them and helping them." But it's because he was in a bigger organization, And I think to Leslie's point, yeah, I think whether it's Josh Koppelman, Aiden at Felicis, pick a person that's a builder. He doesn't take it away from other people that join firms, but there's just a different mentality. And I think some of that mentality is like, I am not going to die. I'm going to find victory through this. It's not, I'm happy to be here,
There's no shade in this at all, but I do think it's really important for founders when they approach a VC to understand what type of VC they are. Because I think about when you think about like someone like me or Ross, like we are the GPs, we own our firms, we own our AUM, we build our own portfolio, and we are thinking across the entire portfolio. And really, our own evaluation is whether we can raise the next fund or not, right? Like we are evaluated over a very long period of time. Versus the VC who is employed at a bigger firm, they're evaluated on an annual basis, right? Like they report to someone, they are kind of optimizing, maybe not for the entire firm's portfolio, but for their specific deals that they can make. Maybe they can only make one or two deals a year. I think it makes their approach to investing and what they're looking for quite a bit different. And so I usually do coach founders, like when you're going to go out and pitch, particularly at the early stages, like, are you pitching to a VC who has a purview across the entire portfolio, or are you pitching to someone who is optimizing for the one deal they're going to make that year?
What about from the LP perspective? I imagine it can be similar, right? If a family office might do, fewer deals in very specific targeted industries versus a more, institutionalized LP.
How you come into raising your fund makes the answer to that question very different. If you're breaking off of a larger firm and you already have institutional LP relationships and an institutional grade track record, then you probably just go to the same LPs that backed your prior firm and they will follow you. Versus if you are raising a fund as an outsider, as somebody who has not worked in VC before, then I think that it is a lot more of an angel fundraise and it takes a lot more time to graduate into institutional relationships. And so it's a lot more likely, like myself, like your first fund, your second fund are going to be individuals, family offices. And it's quite rare to get an institution to commit to fund managers in the earliest fund. So you need kind of a couple of reps. Like I'm only just now graduating into institutional LP relationships.
I would say, yeah, we have the great fortune of having two different lenses because we're at a different phase. And so all of our LPs are institutional investors, which is great. But the actual lived experience I had is maybe two things. One is this, I want to put further bit of energy on you can just tell immediately. I mean, whether people want to do the thing that you want to do. And I just feel so strongly about that. Even now, when I meet other large institutionals, I can tell instantly if we resonate with them. The second thing is I'm so unbelievably lazy. We really only talk to people through referral, which is a great fortune. But I also think in the earliest days, that was the biggest benefit, is asking our LPs who are the other people that they want to co-invest with, that they thought had a similar strategy, again, because you're trying to drive qualification.
I do want to shift gears a little bit to talk about from the founder perspective and sort of how founders understand VC fund economics. Is there anything that a founder who's fundraising should know about your relationships or the dynamics with LPs, what your relationship with them is, and anything they should sort of ask VCs about that when they are looking for investment?
I don't think it's very important for the founders. The thing that I think that the founders don't pay enough attention to, and we talk a lot about, is actually partnerships versus partners. So if there's a place that people should put more intellectual awareness, I think that's not that, hey, Isabel loves me, she seems excited, she's doing diligence. It's paying attention to the full partnership and like, hey, every security deal they've ever done, they've lost money on, or they seem to only be doing deals that are north of $1 billion, or the other extreme, or, they don't seem to they get frightened at anything that's over $10 million post, and paying attention to that, because I think there's a lot of head fakes that happen in larger partnerships where if the founders are paying attention or talking to us or their existing investors about the partnership dynamic, I think that's something that people would benefit from paying a lot more attention to. But the L in limited partner is correct. Like, they're really an arm's distance. It's great for us, as I'm sure is for Leslie and others, that we work on behalf of schools and foundations, and we try and do more and more of that so we can feel better about when we make money, we're making it for good people doing good things. That matters a lot to us, but to the founders themselves, I think it's really on the margins.
That's a great point. And I almost I feel for founders because it can be really hard to know how a partnership works together if you don't have experience with what are the power dynamics, who needs to be convinced within a multi-partner firm. Those are not obvious and end up having a lot of repercussions on their investing decisions and how they show up afterwards. And I just don't think that that's super discoverable. I think it's very insider knowledge.
And so aside from pitching LPs, obviously your day-to-day more consists of attracting founders and building deal flow, right? The actual nitty-gritty of a VC's job. But I think in the last few years, we've seen that the traditional founders pitch to VC has shifted a little bit because the investment landscape has shifted. And naturally, there's higher competition for some of these top deals, right? Investors are making fewer bets and bigger checks in the same handful of companies. And so it seems like these days the VCs are often the ones who are doing some of the pitching to founders. I'm curious how both of you view the competitive landscape of the VC ecosystem when it comes to getting in on some of these hot deals that people are competing for.
Maybe two things. One is I love this change. I mean, I raised money in 2006 and 7, when it was still you go down to Sand Hill and you got to have an introduction, and it's all this process that involves some amount of begging at the seat of capital. I love the fact that now, when I hear about someone that's interesting, that's doing I'm sprinting down to the Starbucks to meet them. I love that capital has shifted that way, and there's some silly hype cycles that go along with it, and some 15-year-olds raising, at $1 billion, whatever. I just think it's better, or certainly more interesting, is the first thing. The second thing is that we tend to, I see finance as the Amazon River. I think there's lots of water. You can make money in lots of different places. We really stick to our networks and a set of people that we think are exceptional, and then those people introduce us to other people. That's where we spend a lot of our time. So that could be customers that tell us that there's a problem that exists in pharmacovigilance, which is a really boring, giant category of pharma. Or it could be a Palantir founder that introduces us to another Palantir founder, or an exec that comes out of a company. But we tend to do that. And so as a function of that, we're usually finding something hopefully earlier, but certainly with this very, very, very high bias to already work with us. And then we're just putting together the deal based on what we want to do. Not always, but typically, and that's our goal. And again, it's a combination of network approach and then, as I said, sprinting down the street to meet somebody, which by the way is the exact same as our founders, is the exact same as, the CEO of Nominal calling me between recruiting calls and customer calls at like 8 o'clock on Sunday night. And like, he's just doing the same thing, which is, getting in the mix at all times.
Mutual hustle. But Leslie, what about you? How do you feel about founders who are playing hard to get?
Oh my gosh, I have so many thoughts. So I will say that I am someone who comes from nowhere and not connected and not matching the type in any way, shape, or form. And I believe that talent can come from anywhere. I came to this country because I believe in the American dream. And I think that venture capital can be its truest incarnation. And that is really inspiring to me. And it's why I do what I do. And I think that like my firm, we don't want to compete in the consensus capital rounds. We want to meet the founders before they're obvious. When I started this whole journey, I used to feel really strongly that the need for a warm introduction was almost like an unfair, I wanted to have the type of fund that would invest in founders that come in cold and just like really spread opportunity that way. And I still believe that, but something happened that changed that. And that for me, that is AI. 5 years ago, cold inbound used to be a little bit more thoughtful. Today, it's not that we get 1,000 crappy cold inbounds. It's that we get 1,000 perfect ones because founders are just able to like find all of our names and emails on whatever software they're paying for and create like a perfect pitch email. It has become complete noise. And I don't believe that it is possible today to run the type of fund that can really just sort through the cold inbound and do that sustainably.
That's very interesting, and I think
I told you I had a lot of thoughts.
no, and I appreciate it because it's a hot take that I think needs to be heard. But I'm curious how you both view relationship building with founders that you're sort of courting. How long do you spend getting to know a founder before maybe you decide to write a check? Are there certain activities or I don't want to say tests, but certain things that you want to see them do or prove before you write that check? What are sort of your green flags in the courting period, and how long does it usually take?
So we've started 120 odd companies in the portfolio. We started to be 8 internally, soon to be 9. So a lot of people even come in and build stuff. We've got people that we backed repeatedly, and then we've got people that we've met and we've, like drunken pirates invested in 2 days later. So I think a lot of it, there's so much of it depends. The two things that are the most important to me, and these actually, they've reversed orders over the years. The first is actually the market. And so can the founders demonstrate that the market is moving in their direction? Or if it's a very early company, can they articulate why in some future point, the market is going to move in their direction? And so that articulation that could happen in one meeting, that could happen over a period of years. That's probably the most important thing. The second, which is easier to demonstrate in a short period of time, is just raw execution, just raw velocity. We actually just backed an amazing set of 3 founders. And long story short, they're building in sort of the autonomous space. And we said like, well, we think we should really understand what Waymo and Google and Tesla think about this. And I literally didn't think about it. We talked to them 2 days later, and they're like, so we talked to the CEO of Waymo, and I'm like, how the hell? They're like, but it's like, and the story was like, just they agreed that was worth doing, and they just did all the work to get in front of all those people in 48 hours. And you're like, well, that's a winner. She is going to find her way to a customer, to a closing ahead of sales, to all those things. So it's market plus execution. That is like, is the market ready and shifting in their favor in the execution? And that's everything that we're looking for. And shocker, that actually continues the whole way through. So that's first investment, but there's reserve dollars, there's Series B dollars that we lead those rounds, and are those two things showing up just consistently the whole way through? That's everything.
I feel like I've done both. Like, I have 3 days to decide. And I haven't done that a ton of times, but if that ever comes to be that, like, this round is happening now and you're either in or you're out, and like there's no time to build trust. And like there, you can diligence the company and you can talk to a customer. Like you can do very little to get to know the person that you're investing in. Where that introduction came from in that case matters a ton, right? Because like it's almost like this came from someone that I really trust and they really trust this person. And therefore, I feel a little bit better about having to move really, really fast without building a foundation of getting to know them as people, right? Like we're going to be stuck with each other for a decade. And so like we really hope that like this is a good set of humans that you're putting money into. And sometimes you just have to move a little faster than you want. And that warm introduction really helps in those cases. And then I've also done the like, meet someone that I think is amazing, but I just cannot invest in what they have in front, like right now. Or maybe you just, like I said, I like to invest in outsiders. So like maybe they just don't have a trajectory. I have invested in someone like 2 years after I met them and just like watch them execute over time and prove me wrong and then eventually come into it. So I think it's driven a lot more by the founder than it is by the VC.
Leslie, one thing that I think is really fun is actually the joy of then leaning into the relationship in
Totally.
the sense of like, if someone I trust is like, this is one of the two best people I've ever met. Like I am like so wired to just give them money.
Yeah.
Is they're like leaning into the trust aspect of the network because it's worked so well. And that's an unexpected, it can be scary, but usually it's like, oh, this is so exciting. Leslie said, this is the best person. Like
I love to get those. Like,
yeah.
I love to get those.
And
My
then,
last deal was one like that,
yeah.
where it's like
Yeah.
a founder in the portfolio is like, if I get to tell you to invest in one person, this is the person. I was like,
Yeah.
all right, 3 days, let's do it. Let's
Exactly.
go for it.
Like it's sort of thrilling when they move that way.
Yeah.
It's all the downsides of like, it's such a relationship based business, but the upsides of it are then you can move so quickly. It's not always right because, venture, but you can move so quickly. And I think that's fun and joyful,
Yeah, it's really cool. Like
unexpectedly so.
the part of the job that where you get to believe in someone and do something about it is probably my favorite.
I think I see a lot of founders who will either say, I'm raising right now and have sort of this rush timeline. Maybe they're trying to create investor FOMO, or they say, no, we're not raising, and they sort of stop having investor conversations. But in reality, it sounds like more than a no, VCs are often giving a not right now, right? Give us some time to build this relationship. Don't go and approach VCs when you're desperate, but rather start early and start cultivating those relationships. I think on the flip side, to end with some founder advice, we often see that a lot of VCs claim to be value add and have all of these additional resources to offer founders. But like you said, Leslie, money is a commodity, and there is still, many opportunities and options for founders of who they should take capital from. So I would love to hear each of your 3 key things that you would advise founders to consider when looking at different sources of capital, but investors in general.
Well, if you don't mind, I'm going to go first because I only have 3 things. Like I just have such a simple rubric, and I talk about it all the time, which is it's person, firm, terms, and the terms almost always collapse. So the reality is it's what Leslie said. You're with this person for forever. So it's everything from like, are they fun? Do you trust them? Do they have the juice to get the deal done? It's everything around this human, and then the distant second is this firm going to be helpful? Is the brand accretive? Do you like the other set of people around the table? Do you like the morals of the firm that you can discern? And then the terms behind it.
Yeah, I don't know that I have 3 things. I completely agree. I mean, money is a commodity, but people are not. And you're going to have a relationship with whoever is the steward of that money for a really long time. When it's an angel investor or a GP-led firm, then that is the person. When it's a multi-partner, larger firm, that may not be the person, right? Like they may end up dropping off the board and kind of handing off that board seat to somebody else. So in those cases, firm matters. So I think like diligencing the person, and some things that I would add is that you get to build a team with the money that you're raising, right? Like you're probably not just going to raise from a lead. You're going to fill it up with either other firms or with strategic investors or with angel investors, especially in the early days. And I think that you almost get to like fill your bench, right? Like make it work for you. Not every investor needs to fill the same job on your cap table. Like some of them are there because they bring the money. Some of them are there because they bring the name brand. Some of them are there because you need somebody that you can call when shit hits the fan, right? Like, and to have like a real conversation with. I like to be like, my value adds were like, I like to be the call before the board call, right? Like the one that you practice with. So yeah, every investor brings something different. Once you have that lead, you almost like get to decide what you do with the rest of the round. And I think that is a privilege for founders, and I think that they should use it intelligently.
Thank you both so much for joining us. I think your insights are invaluable to a lot of the founders listening, right? I think VC can sometimes be a bit of a black box to many people, and to hear your candid thoughts is really valuable. So thank you both. Appreciate it.
Thank you. This is really fun.
Thank you.
Well, I hope all you founders were taking notes, because Ross and Leslie are chock full of advice for helping you build the best possible relationship with your investors. And now we've got a treat for you. In this Field Notes segment, we asked VCs for their most creative ways that they have courted founders. I will let them now take it away.
Hi, I'm Eddie, an investor at Scale Venture Partners, where we back early stage founders. One thing that I've been thinking of recently is how can we stand out with the founders we want to support? And I had the idea of doing customized swag for the founder and company instead of doing kind of generic swag. So actually the last deal that I worked on, GCAI, who's building AI for in-house legal teams, I had found out that Cecilia, the CEO, has 4 young daughters. And so I thought, what better swag to get them than personalized scale ex-GCAI Labubus? We had actually been toying with the idea of personalized Labubus at scale for a while. My operating partner, Dale, even went to Boo Boo Fest in San Francisco with his daughter for research purposes. But we did get custom scale Labubus out of that. So I thought that getting the same thing for Cecilia and her daughters would be great. It was a lot of work finding 6 Labubus, though. They're really hard to find, so I had to run all across SF and get them their custom Scale X GCI branded jackets. But in the end, it was a great success. I mean, her daughters loved them, and we won the deal. Probably it wasn't just the Labubus that got us the deal. I think it was all the other hard work that our team had done. But in the end, I like to think that Labubus played a part.
Hi, TechCrunch team. My name's Amanda Bell. I am a team member over at XYZ Ventures. We're a New York-based pre-seed and seed fund focused on technologies that shape and are shaped by consumer behavior, which is a massive, rapidly evolving market that drives about 70% of US GDP, yet remains largely overlooked by most venture investors. So I'd love to share a story. In 2022, our team attended Shop Talk, which is a major consumer-focused conference that typically takes place in Las Vegas. We engaged a top-ranked female professional poker player and game theory expert. Her name's Vanessa Russo, to co-host a women-only event around Shop Talk on translating poker skills to negotiation skills. She discussed real-world applications that female founders can apply, like reading the competition, securing the upper hand in negotiations, managing bullies at the poker table or the conference table, acting assertively and strategically, and taking calculated risks with confidence. I thought this was a really creative event that our team planned, and it really helped us differentiate ourselves and meet more female founders. So we would definitely do something like this again. And you can learn more about us at www.xrcventures.com. Thanks.
And that's a wrap on this week's episode. Thank you to everyone who called in. If you have a topic you'd like us to cover or a go-to-market strategy that you'd like to share, please email us at buildmode@techcrunch.com. Build Mode is a TechCrunch podcast. Each episode is produced and edited by Maggie Nye and hosted by me, Isabel Johannesson. Our art and design is also by Maggie Nye. A big thanks to Morgan Little, who leads our audience development, the Foundry and Cheddar video teams, and most of all to you, the builders, and everyone else in the wider startup community. We'll see you back here next time.